what I basically do is, I'm an alchemist or a black magician. And let me clarify what that is, all right? Because people get spooked out when they hear the word black magician. We're not talking about satanic sacrifices and cutting the throat of goats and blood and all that, because that's the Hollywood interpretation of it. So I want to stress that. What real magic is manipulation of the subconscious mind. That's real magic, okay? Let me give you an example. Regardless how much you hate or like Walt Disney, that's magic. Because Walt Disney took a concept and created a parallel universe within a universe, and the concept has been so strong to this day, it's become a multi-billion-dollar industry. So what he did was captivate the mind and the imagination. That same principle, when you go back into the 7 Hermetic principles of Tahuti, and like I said earlier, you got everybody out here now, Egypt, talking about Egypt. It's become so trendy in the end thing. You got everybody talking about Egyptian Ma'at, but I don't hear anybody talking about the 7 Hermetic principles. You cannot understand Ma'at if you do not understand the 7 Hermetic principles of Tahuti. They're both married to each other, they're both interconnected, and you need to understand both, or understand both, so you can actually see what it's trying to really say. Now, the first principle of Tahuti is all is mental, mental is all. An alchemist or a magician knows that nothing exists outside the subconscious mind. So that's what I mean when I say real spiritual magic is manipulation of the subconscious mind. It all comes from within the subconscious mind. That precept is, if you go back into the Egyptian writings and you go back into the Coming Forth by Day, which they falsely call the Egyptian Book of the Dead, you go into the scrolls of the various different temples. You can go to the what they call also the opening of the mouth ceremony. Various different texts that you can find in ancient Egypt. You will find out the story, for an example, of the deity they call Tar, or some pronounce it Pat. They say, and what does this really mean? They say that Tar thought himself into existence. What does that really mean? What it's saying is, you literally become your thoughts. What you think, you become. Now, somebody took that concept, okay, they transitioned it and reversed it on us, and they now have us focusing outside of ourselves, and most people are convinced that deity exists outside of themselves. So they created this fictitious concept that there's a being called God, Allah, Jehovah, Jesus, whatever terminology you want to give it, that exists outside yourself and that has the key and the power to your salvation. What that is a heavy indoctrinated system of mental slavery. The first thing that they did to melanated people all over the world, blacks, Latinos, and Asians, and all people that are part of the melanated family, anytime they enslaved us, the first thing they did was take our language and our culture and our rituals. Because they knew the rituals, the culture, is what connected us to our ancestors. So they stripped us of that, and then they gave us their image and likeness of God. They gave us their European Christianity and Islam. I don't care what religion you follow today, whether you're black, white, Spanish, if you're following Christianity, it's European Christianity. I don't care if you belong to an all-black Baptist church. That doesn't make it black. You're calling upon the spirits of their ancestors. Okay, if you're using the tones and frequencies that are affiliated with those deities that they call upon, you are activating that energy. Okay? There is, what do they say? There's power in the name Jesus. They just ain't telling you what power. You understand what I'm getting at? So this is why we stay enslaved. And people want to know, when are things going to change? Well, things are not going to change until you give up every aspect and concept of their ways, their cultures, their philosophies, their dogmas, their way of life. You can't scream change, and you can't scream you want to overturn the system that's oppressing you, when subconsciously, whether you're aware of it or not, you are the one keeping the system in power. That's what people fail to realize. Change ain't going to mystically happen, and this is what people got to understand. There is no Jesus coming out of the sky. It's not going to happen. You can believe that if you want. I mean, it's personal. It's a belief. You can't prove it, because they can't prove any of this stuff until they go to their Bible. And most of them don't even know the history of their Bible, the origin of their Bible, how the Bible was written, They want to come to you with a King James version of the Bible as if they can authenticate the reality of it. And then when you start getting scientific and historical on, they get mad. Because they want you to accept faith and belief. And what is faith and belief? It's things accepted without being proven. So if that's your thing, that's your thing. But don't get upset when other people's ideology doesn't line up with that. That's where the problem comes in. So you got people thinking, just like they're thinking now, that there's an actual election, because you see what's going on in the political arena. They're getting ready to do the switcheroo on your ass again. After they threw Obama in there as a token for 8 years, after Bush destroyed the country, they knew there was going to be civil unrest, so they had to throw you a black president. And everybody thought that that was it. We had the savior. The problem was over for melanated people. Well, I'll tell you what, the problem's just beginning. Okay, you're about to see some stuff in the next 4 years you've never seen. And they're using their voice piece, whether he wins or not, Donald Trump, they're showing you how America really feels. They're telling you how they really feel about you. And it's entertainment. And they got this clown up there saying the most ridiculous stuff. But it's for a reason. Now, we also have to get over the psychological warfare that they put on us. Because, see, we're always attacking things from a physical perspective. Right now, it's mental and it's psychological. And if we don't look at this as a whole perspective, look at little things. Let me give you an example. This is the worst month. I can't stand this month. I call it the wannabe Black History Month. Let me show you why. Because they act as if the only history melanated people made was civil rights history. They always focus on, and it's not, believe me, and my heart goes out to all of those elders that struggled in the civil rights movement. I'm not downplaying, because we can't even begin to imagine the atrocities, the beatings, and a bunch of the nonsense they had to go through. So I'm not saying that to disrespect or downplay that, because what I am saying is that is not the only history that we have made. There is always an intent at this time of year to focus our attention on the civil rights era. Okay? First of all, the civilizers cannot fight for civility. Let me say that again. We were the civilizers. They violently took our knowledge, our information, and everything that we taught them and switched it around on us. So first of all, we didn't have to fight for civil rights. We never did. We were the civilizers. Let's establish that shit. All right? Then what they want to do is insult your intelligence, because now we're into their biggest spell of the season called Easter season, Lent, Easter. So now you got the Ten Commandments is going to come on TV. Now they're going to keep perpetrating that myth. Charlton Heston is Moses, the whole, now all the religious movies, they got a new Jesus movie that's about to drop. You'll probably saw the commercial. That's getting ready to drop in 2 weeks. Every year they got to come out with a new Jesus movie around Lent and stamp in your subconscious mind this man worship. All right? And then here's the biggest insult that they just released this past Friday. The gods of Egypt.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Why did that movie have to come out this month? Now, why is it here in 2016 we still cannot accept the fact that Egypt is Africa and that all the gods and all the inhabitants of those lands, not modern-day Egyptians, we know they're mixed, were African. So now they got more movies showing Caucasians with blonde hair as Egyptian deities. This is a fucking joke. Straight comical. And then they have a couple of black slaves thrown in there depicted. You see the commercial. They throw a couple of token blacks in there. And they made sure at this strategic point that this movie came out right before Black History Month was over. So now they're stamping in your subconscious mind at the end of Black History Month. Whether you're aware of it or not, they still want to stamp the images in your mind that these deities were Caucasian. So we got to bypass this. We have to get past this. We have to address it. And if we don't address it, because what tends to happen, where people get stuck in their spirituality is they don't want to address the traumas that have impacted the subconscious mind. We talked about this many different times. And what I mean by that is if you're lost, a lot of people will leave schools and philosophies that they were raised in, be it Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and they'll come into whatever form of consciousness. It could be Dravidian or Hinduism. It could be Buddhism. It could be Egyptology. But they still have a Christian mindset. That's the problem. So now Horus replaces Jesus. Now you got these fools correlating the story. Well, the horror story is Jesus. Yeah, we know that. But let's not make it the same thing literally, where now we're focusing worship towards an object again. Because what those deities represent are archetype energies that exist in the subconscious mind. This is part of working a real magical system. Meaning, if you're confused on that, let's talk about that. If I'm trying to invoke a warrior spirit, a true magician knows the movements of the planets, the positioning of the moon with the astrological signs. This is why you'll find most of the deities are connected to an element and an astrological sign. That's when you activate the forces of those deities, the energy that it represents. And I've talked about this before. Let's say the deity Ra. Everybody loves Ra. Some people have turned Ra into a religion. They call him the Most High. And they say it's a him. Now we're back to religion worship again. How is that different than a Christian that believes in God or Allah? There's no difference. All you're doing is sprinkling a little Egyptology on it. So you might as well stay in the church and wait for some spook god called Jesus to come flying out the sky to save you. It's no different. And don't convince yourself of otherwise. Ra represents the fire element. He ties into the constellation Taurus, the bull. You also see in the writings and in the temple of Ra in Egypt, he also has the animal of the bull as a representation in the sacred temple of Ra. So one would activate the fire element or the warrior spirit under the sign of Taurus. So if you were doing spiritual work at your altar and you needed, say, you wanted cleansing or purification, you would activate the energy of fire by way of the deity, archetype energy of Ra. It's one aspect. If you were looking for knowledge, wisdom, and intellect, you would work with the deity and activate the archetype energy of Tahuti, who is the scribe, who deals with intellect, knowledge, wisdom. What we have done is taken that, and now we've got statues, and now we're worshiping these things as if they're literal things, the same way a Catholic does when a Catholic walks into a Catholic church. They pray in front of statues of Mary and Joseph and the saints and Jesus. So now we're back to that man worship again, taking us outside of ourselves, focusing our energy on something that has nothing to do with us. Now, it's hard for people to grasp that because they can't understand the concept of deity without focusing their attention and object on something or somebody. Everybody follow so far? If you have questions, raise your hands. Remember, this is a question and answer session. Because you know me, I can talk till the sun comes up in the morning. So the key element, I'm going to go back to this. I'm just watching this clock because I got to do this in increments. The key element is understanding these 7 Hermetic principles. I'm going to go through them real briefly, and we're going to talk about these for a quick minute. If you want to create your own spiritual path, remember, that's what we're talking about tonight, creating your own spiritual path by way of alchemy and magic. I always recommend to people, they say, well, where do I start? How do I begin? What's a good direction? Point me. And I always refer them to the 7 Hermetic principles. Study this, master it, understand it, because if you do, you won't have any problems getting to the point that you need to be at, where you need to go. So let's talk about this real quick. The first principle, the principle of mentalism, which is probably the most important out of all of them. And that states that all is mind, the universe is mental. Let's reflect on that for a quick minute. The all is mind, and the mind is all, and the universe is mental. Now, when you go back to the story of Ptah, it says Ptah thought himself into existence. Anything you can see or think about exists in the subconscious mind. There's nothing that you can't conceive or think about that